The marble lobby echoed with laughter, cruel, cutting laughter that wrapped around 10-year-old Jamal Carter like chains. Branch manager Gavin Rourke stood behind his desk, holding up a premium banking card between two fingers like it was contaminated, his voice booming across Granite Trust Bank. "You expect me to believe this belongs to you?" Customers turned, stared, whispered. A small black boy in worn sneakers had just become the afternoon's entertainment. What none of them knew, what would shatter Gavin's smug smile in exactly 47 minutes, was that the little thief clutching his grandmother's envelope had an uncle who could buy and sell this entire building before lunch. And he was already on his way. If you want to see how this story ends, stay with me until the very last word. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Jamal's story travels. The December wind cut through Jamal Carter's jacket like it wasn't even there. He stood outside Granite Trust Bank, staring up at the building his grandmother had described 100 times. Glass and marble. Clean, respectable. The kind of place where people kept their dreams safe. Grandma Eleanor had died 3 weeks ago. Breast cancer, stage 4, discovered too late because she'd skipped appointments to pay for Jamal's school supplies. The funeral had been small, just Jamal, his uncle Darius, who'd flown in from New York, and a handful of Eleanor's fellow teachers from the elementary school where she'd worked for 37 years. At the reception, Uncle Darius had pressed an envelope into Jamal's hands. "Your grandmother left something for you," he'd said quietly, his eyes red-rimmed behind expensive glasses. "Instructions are inside. She wanted you to handle this yourself when you were ready. Said it would teach you something important." Jamal had waited until he could breathe without crying. Today was that day. He pushed through the heavy revolving door into a lobby that smelled like leather and money. The ceiling stretched up 2 stories, decorated with gold trim that caught the afternoon light. His sneakers, the ones with the sole starting to separate on the left foot, squeaked on the polished floor. A woman in a navy suit glanced at him, then looked away quickly. A man in an expensive coat shifted his briefcase to his other hand and moved slightly to the left, creating distance. Jamal pretended not to notice. He'd learned that trick in 3rd grade. The customer service counter sat at the back of the lobby, behind a velvet rope that marked the waiting area. Jamal joined the line behind 2 other people, a white woman in a fur collar and an older white man checking his Rolex. They didn't acknowledge him. The woman finished her transaction, received a broad smile from the representative, and left. The man moved forward. Jamal waited, holding his grandmother's envelope against his chest like a shield. When his turn came, he approached the counter where a nameplate read Hannah Pike, Senior Associate. Hannah was maybe 30, with highlighted hair pulled into a tight bun and makeup that looked professionally applied. She glanced up from her computer screen, saw Jamal, and her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, not quite a frown, but something close. Her eyes moved from his face to his jacket to his shoes, cataloging and dismissing him in seconds. "Can I help you?" The words were correct, but the tone wasn't. It was the voice adults used when they'd already decided you were wasting their time. "Yes, ma'am." Jamal set the envelope on the counter carefully. His grandmother had taught him manners mattered most when people expected you to have none. "I need to check my account balance, please." Hannah's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Your account?" "Yes, ma'am. My grandmother set it up for me. She passed away, and she left me instructions to come here and—" "Hold on." Hannah held up one manicured hand. "How old are you?" 10. "I'll be 11 in February." Huh? She pulled the envelope toward her with 2 fingers, like it might be dirty. "And you're saying you have an account here? At Granite Trust?" "That's what my grandmother told me." She said, "What's your name?" "Jamal Carter." Hannah typed something into her computer, her lips pursed. The clicking of her keyboard seemed loud in the suddenly quiet lobby. Jamal noticed other customers were watching now, their transactions paused, attention drawn by the novelty of a child at the banking counter. "I'm not seeing any account under that name in our youth savings program," Hannah said, her voice carrying farther than necessary. "Are you sure your grandmother banked with us?" "Yes, ma'am. She worked at Riverside Elementary for 37 years, and she always came here. She said this was the best bank in the city." "Well, there's no account here." Hannah started to push the envelope back across the counter. "Maybe she meant a different branch, or—" "Wait, please." Jamal opened the envelope with shaking fingers and pulled out the contents. There was a letter in his grandmother's handwriting, a bank card, and a folded piece of paper with account numbers. She gave me this card and these numbers. She said everything I needed was here. Hannah's eyes landed on the card, and her expression changed entirely. Her mouth opened slightly. The card was black with silver lettering, a premium tier that Jamal didn't understand but Hannah clearly recognized. "Where did you get this?" Her voice had gone sharp. "My grandmother left it for me, in her will. Uncle Darius gave me the envelope after the funeral, and this is a Platinum Reserve card." Hannah picked it up like it was evidence at a crime scene. "These are invitation only. You can't just... Did you take this from someone?" The question hit Jamal like a slap. "No, it's mine, my grandmother." "Thomas," Hannah called toward the back offices, her voice cutting through the lobby. "Thomas, I need a manager up here right now." Faces turned. Conversations stopped. Jamal felt his cheeks burning, that familiar heat that came with being the center of the wrong kind of attention. The fur collar woman from earlier had paused near the entrance, watching. A businessman in line whispered something to his companion. They both looked at Jamal. A man emerged from a glass-walled office at the rear of the lobby, tall, mid-40s, with perfectly styled salt and pepper hair and a suit that probably cost more than Jamal's uncle paid in rent. His nameplate read Gavin Rourke, branch manager. He moved toward the counter with the confident stride of someone who owned not just this building, but possibly the entire block. "What's the problem, Hannah?" His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that sold people things they didn't need. "This boy..." Hannah hesitated on the word, making it sound like an accusation. "He's claiming he has an account here, and he's got a Platinum Reserve card that he says his grandmother gave him." Gavin's eyes moved to Jamal for the first time. The assessment was instant and complete. Worn jacket, cheap sneakers, dark skin, clutching an envelope with trembling hands. Gavin's expression hardened into something between amusement and disgust. "Is that right?" He walked around the counter, positioning himself between Jamal and Hannah, creating a wall of authority. "Son, why don't you tell me where you really got that card?" "My grandmother, the truth." Gavin's voice dropped lower, taking on an edge that made Jamal's stomach tighten. "You walk in here with a premium banking card that has a $50,000 minimum balance requirement, wearing shoes that are falling apart, and you expect us to believe it's yours." "It is mine." Jamal's voice came out smaller than he wanted. "She left it for me. There's a letter." Gavin snatched the envelope from the counter. He pulled out Eleanor's letter, scanned it quickly, then laughed. A sharp, barking sound that carried across the entire lobby. "Oh, this is rich." He held up the letter, reading aloud. "My dearest Jamal, this account represents a lifetime of saving and sacrifice. It's yours now to use for your education and your future. Always remember that your worth isn't measured in dollars, but in character and kindness. Signed, Eleanor Carter." He lowered the paper, his smile cruel. "That's sweet, really sweet. Did you write this yourself, or did someone help you?" "My grandmother wrote it." Jamal's hands had curled into fists at his sides. "Before she died. She wanted me to have the account for college." "Your grandmother." Gavin made a show of examining the card again. "Eleanor Carter. And she just happened to have $500,000 sitting in a premium account that she wanted to give to her 10-year-old grandson." The number, $500,000, hit Jamal like a physical blow. He'd known the account existed, but Grandma Eleanor had never told him how much. She'd only said it was enough to change your life if you use it wisely. "I didn't know how much," Jamal started, but Gavin cut him off. "Of course you didn't." He turned to Hannah, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Call security and pull up theft reports from the last month. I want to know who this card was stolen from." "I didn't steal anything." The words burst out of Jamal, louder than he intended. Several customers near the entrance actually stepped back. "My grandmother was a teacher. She saved for my whole life. You can check, just look up her name." "Lower your voice." Gavin's hand moved toward Jamal's shoulder but didn't quite touch. "You're causing a scene." "You're calling me a thief." Tears were burning behind Jamal's eyes now, but he forced them back. Crying would only make this worse. "Just check the account, please. The numbers are right there." Gavin glanced at the paper with the account information, then back at Jamal. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Maybe doubt, maybe the slightest recognition that he might be wrong. But then he looked around the lobby, at the watching faces, at Hannah Pike waiting for instructions, at the security guard who'd started moving closer from his post by the door. Making a scene was bad for business, but backing down in front of customers, admitting he might have misjudged this situation, that was worse. Hannah, take him to the verification office. Gavin handed back the envelope and card, his voice firm with false authority. We'll need to confirm the account details and contact the authorized holder before we proceed. Standard security protocol for suspicious activity. Suspicious? Jamal's voice cracked. I'm not suspicious. I'm just trying to check my account like you told me to. And we'll help you do that. Gavin's smile was plastic, meant for the watching customers more than for Jamal. Once we've verified everything, Hannah will take you to our customer hold area while I make some calls. It's just procedure. The customer hold area. Jamal didn't know what that meant, but it sounded bad. He looked around the lobby for help, for someone to say this was wrong, that you couldn't just accuse a kid of stealing when he hadn't done anything. But the fur collar woman had left. The businessman was focused intently on his phone. An elderly couple by the ATMs deliberately looked away. Come on, sweetie. Hannah's voice had shifted to something artificially kind, the way people talked to dogs they were afraid might bite. It'll just take a few minutes. She gestured toward a hallway that led away from the main lobby. Jamal followed because he didn't know what else to do. His grandmother had told him to always cooperate with authority, to be polite even when people weren't polite back. But she'd never told him what to do when authority itself was the problem. The verification office turned out to be a windowless room near the back of the building, past the employee break room and the vault entrance. It had a metal desk, 2 plastic chairs, and walls the color of old oatmeal. A security camera blinked red in the corner. Wait here, Hannah pointed to one of the chairs. Mr. Rourke will come talk to you once he's made his calls. She left, closing the door behind her with a click that might have been a lock. Jamal sat in the chair, the envelope clutched in his lap, and waited. Through the thin walls, he could hear muffled voices from the break room. Someone laughed. Someone else complained about a customer who'd wanted to dispute a fee. Normal bank business, continuing like nothing was wrong. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Jamal pulled out the letter from his grandmother and read it again, her handwriting blurring slightly as his eyes started to water. My dearest Jamal, this account represents a lifetime of saving and sacrifice. Every dollar came from substitute teaching on weekends, every cent from tutoring in the summers. I skipped vacations and drove the same car for 20 years. I did it gladly because you are my greatest investment. The world will try to tell you that your worth is measured in what you own. Don't believe it. Your worth is measured in who you are, in your kindness, your integrity, your willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Use this money for your education. Become someone who makes the world better. And always remember, respect isn't something you earn by having wealth. It's something you deserve by being human. I love you beyond measure. Grandma Eleanor Jamal folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. His grandmother had been wrong about one thing, though. The world didn't just try to tell you your worth. It showed you, in rooms like this, in people like Gavin Rourke, in the way customers look through you like you were invisible. The door opened. Gavin stepped inside, his expression unreadable now, the earlier amusement replaced by something harder. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood with his arms crossed, looking down at Jamal like a prosecutor who'd already decided on guilt. I've reviewed the account, he said flatly. Jamal's heart jumped. So you know it's real? You know my grandmother. The account exists. Gavin cut him off. Eleanor Carter, deceased as of 3 weeks ago. There is a custodial provision for a minor beneficiary named Jamal Carter. Relief flooded through Jamal so powerfully, he almost stood up. So I can... However, the word landed like a hammer. There are significant irregularities that need to be addressed before any access can be granted. What irregularities? The account shows substantial deposits over a 37-year period. The final balance is considerable. For a public school teacher's salary, the accumulation is unusual. Jamal's relief curdled into something sick and cold. She saved her whole life. She told me, people tell their grandchildren a lot of things. Gavin pulled out his phone, tapped something, then showed Jamal the screen. It displayed a form with official-looking letterhead. This is a suspicious activity report. Banks are required to file them when we encounter transactions or accounts that don't match expected patterns. A teacher accumulating this much wealth raises questions. Questions about what? Jamal's voice was shaking now. She worked. She saved. That's not suspicious. That's just... Where did the money really come from, Jamal? Gavin crouched down so they were eye level, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. You can tell me. If your grandmother was involved in something she shouldn't have been, maybe borrowing from the wrong people, maybe getting help she wasn't supposed to get, it's not your fault. But I need to know the truth. The implication hit Jamal like a fist. His grandmother, Eleanor Carter, who'd never gotten a parking ticket in her life, who'd volunteered at the food bank every Saturday, who'd made him promise to always do the right thing even when the wrong thing was easier. This man was suggesting she was a criminal. My grandmother wasn't involved in anything. Jamal's voice came out steady now, powered by anger instead of fear. She was a teacher. She saved money. That's all. Then you won't mind if we take some time to verify everything. Gavin stood, brushing invisible dust from his pants. Full audit, background check, source documentation for all major deposits. Should only take a few weeks. Weeks? Jamal's voice cracked again. I just need to check my balance. I just need to know. You need to understand that banking is serious business. Gavin moved toward the door. We have protocols. We follow them. If everything checks out, you'll get full access to the account. If it doesn't, he let the sentence hang, the threat implicit. This isn't fair. The words sounded childish even to Jamal's ears, but they were true. You're treating me like I did something wrong. I'm treating you like someone who walked into my bank with a questionable story and a premium card that raises red flags. Gavin opened the door. You can wait here while I finish the initial paperwork, or you can leave and come back when we've completed our investigation. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice. Jamal grabbed his envelope and stood. I'll go. Smart decision. Gavin stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway. Hannah will escort you out. Hannah was waiting in the hallway, her expression somewhere between pity and satisfaction. She walked Jamal back through the bank, past the break room where employees looked up briefly from their lunch, past the main lobby where new customers were being helped with smiles and efficiency, past the security guard who watched him with professional suspicion. At the front door, Hannah paused. Look, she said quietly, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. Kids your age shouldn't be worrying about money anyway. Just be a kid, okay? Let the adults handle this stuff. She meant it kindly, Jamal realized. That made it worse somehow. He pushed through the revolving door into the December cold. The wind hit him immediately, cutting through his jacket, making his eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. Behind him, through the glass, he could see Gavin Rourke returning to his office, already moving on to whatever came next in his day. Hannah was back at her counter, greeting an elderly white couple with a warm smile. The bank continued its business, unchanged, unbothered by the fact that they'd just crushed a 10-year-old's trust in the world. Jamal walked to the bus stop, his sneakers slapping against the cold pavement. He pulled out his phone, a basic model his uncle had given him for emergencies, and dialed Uncle Darius's number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Uncle D, it's me. Jamal's voice sounded small in the empty street. I went to the bank like Grandma said. They didn't believe me. They thought I stole the card. They said they have to investigate Grandma's money because teachers aren't supposed to have that much, I guess. He swallowed hard. I don't know what to do. Can you call me back, please? He hung up and sat on the bench, clutching the envelope, watching buses pass that weren't his. The temperature was dropping as afternoon faded toward evening. His jacket wasn't warm enough. His shoes had a hole he'd been trying to ignore. A bus pulled up, the number 47 that would take him most of the way home. Jamal stood, then stopped. Through the bank's window, he could see Gavin Rourke standing in his glass office, laughing at something on his computer screen. Hannah was helping a customer, her hands gesturing expressively. The security guard was checking his phone. Normal, easy, unbothered. Jamal got on the bus, fed his fare into the machine, and found a seat near the back. The doors hissed closed. The bus pulled away from Granite Trust Bank, carrying him back toward the small apartment he'd shared with his grandmother, where her reading glasses still sat on the kitchen table and her favorite mug was still in the dish drainer. He pulled out her letter and read it one more time. Respect isn't something you earn by having wealth. It's something you deserve by being human. His grandmother had believed that, had lived it, had taught it to 3 decades worth of elementary school students who probably didn't remember her name but remembered that she'd seen them, really seen them, when other adults looked past them. But she'd been wrong. Jamal knew that now, sitting on a cold bus in a too-thin jacket, carrying proof of wealth that no one believed belonged to him. Respect wasn't something you deserved. It was something you had to fight for, every single day, in every single interaction, and sometimes you fought and lost anyway. His phone buzzed. Uncle Darius finally calling back. Jamal answered, and before his uncle could even say hello, the words tumbled out. They called Grandma a criminal. They said her money was suspicious. They locked me in a room and told me I had to wait weeks to prove she didn't do anything wrong. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Uncle Darius's voice came through, quiet and controlled in a way that made Jamal sit up straighter. Where are you right now? On the bus, going home. What's the name of the bank? Granite Trust, on Merchant Street. The branch manager is Gavin Rourke. Another pause. Jamal could hear typing in the background, fast and purposeful. Jamal, I need you to listen carefully. Go home, lock the door, and don't talk to anyone from that bank if they call. I'm catching the next flight. I'll be there in 4 hours. Uncle D, you don't have to... Yes. The word was steel wrapped in silk. I really do. Your grandmother was the finest person I ever knew. She saved every penny legally, honestly, and with more integrity than that entire bank has in its vaults. And they're going to learn that lesson, soon. The line went dead. Jamal sat holding the phone, something shifting in his chest. Not hope exactly. Hope seemed too fragile after this afternoon. But something like it. Something that whispered maybe this wasn't over yet. The bus rumbled through the city streets, carrying him home. Behind him, in a glass and marble building that smelled like leather and money, Gavin Rourke sat in his office, completely unaware that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his career. The clock on the wall showed 3:47 p.m. In exactly 43 minutes, everything would change. The apartment felt emptier than usual when Jamal unlocked the door. His grandmother's presence had filled these rooms, even when she was just sitting quietly with a book, but now the silence pressed against him like something physical. He dropped his backpack by the door, set the envelope on the kitchen table next to her reading glasses, and waited. Uncle Darius had said 4 hours. Jamal checked the time, 4:23 p.m. That meant 8:23 at the earliest, assuming no delays. He made himself a peanut butter sandwich he didn't want and turned on the television to fill the quiet. Some game show where people jumped through obstacle courses. Loud, bright, meaningless. Perfect. His phone rang at 6:15 p.m. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, remembering his uncle's warning, but something made him pick up. Jamal Carter? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Who's this? My name is Marissa Cole. I'm the regional director for Granite Trust Bank. I understand you visited our Merchant Street branch today. Jamal's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? It's listed as a contact on Eleanor Carter's account. Jamal, I want to apologize for your experience today. I've been reviewing the incident and I'd like to discuss... My uncle said not to talk to anyone from the bank. The words came out harder than he intended, but he didn't care anymore. There was a brief pause. Your uncle would be Darius Carter, correct? The emergency contact on file? Yeah. I see. Well, perhaps it would be appropriate for me to speak with him directly. When would be a convenient time for me to call? He's on his way here now, from New York. Another pause, longer this time. When Marissa spoke again, her voice had changed, still professional, but with an edge of something that might have been concern. From New York, I see. May I ask what time you expect him? Why do you care? Because, Jamal, I've spent the last hour reviewing security footage and reading the report that Mr. Rourke filed, and I'm finding some significant discrepancies between what happened and what was documented. I'd very much like to speak with your uncle when he arrives. He has your number? I'll make sure he does. Thank you for your time. She hung up before Jamal could respond. He sat staring at the phone, trying to decide if that conversation had made things better or worse. A regional director calling to apologize seemed good, but people in power didn't usually call to apologize unless something had gone very, very wrong. At 7:45 p.m., headlights swept across the living room window. Jamal looked out to see a black town car pulling up to the curb. Not a taxi, something nicer. The back door opened and Uncle Darius stepped out, tall and sharp in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jamal's entire wardrobe. He said something to the driver, grabbed a leather briefcase from the seat, and headed for the building. Jamal had the door open before his uncle reached it. Hey, kiddo. Darius pulled him into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and airplane recycled air. You okay? I'm fine. The words stuck in Jamal's throat. They didn't believe me about anything. I know. Darius set his briefcase down and shrugged off his coat. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. So Jamal told him, the walk into the bank, Hannah Pike's expression when she saw him, Gavin Rourke's laughter echoing across the lobby, the verification room with its oatmeal walls and blinking camera, the suggestion that Eleanor Carter's money was somehow suspicious, somehow wrong. Darius listened without interrupting, his expression growing colder with each detail. When Jamal finished, his uncle was quiet for a long moment, staring at the envelope on the kitchen table. A suspicious activity report, he finally said, his voice soft and dangerous. For a teacher who saved her salary for 4 decades, that's their story. The regional director called, Jamal added. Lady named Marissa Cole. She said she wanted to talk to you, said there were discrepancies in what happened. Darius's eyebrows rose. Marissa called you directly? When? Like an hour ago. Interesting. His uncle pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then made a call. Marissa Cole, please. This is Darius Carter, returning her call. A pause. Yes, I'll hold. Jamal watched his uncle pace the small living room, phone pressed to his ear, every line of his body radiating controlled tension. This was a side of Uncle Darius he rarely saw, not the warm, slightly goofy man who taught him card tricks and brought him books from New York. This was someone else. Someone harder. Marissa, Darius's voice shifted into something professional and precise. I appreciate you reaching out to my nephew, though I'm curious how you knew to do that so quickly. He listened. Uh-huh. And what did the footage show exactly? Another pause. I see. And Mr. Rourke's report claims what? His expression darkened. Right. Well, I think we need to have a conversation. In person. Tonight, if possible. He glanced at Jamal. My nephew and I will be at the Merchant Street branch at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I trust that works for your schedule? A smile flickered across his face, sharp and humorless. Excellent. Oh, and Marissa? Make sure Mr. Rourke is there too. I'd hate for him to miss this. He ended the call and looked at Jamal. Pack a bag. You're staying at my hotel tonight. Why? What's happening tomorrow? Tomorrow, Darius said quietly. We're going back to that bank, and we're going to have a very educational conversation about respect, protocol, and the difference between actual suspicious activity and a black child trying to access his inheritance. They took the town car to the Riverside Hotel, the nicest one in the city, all marble lobby and crystal chandeliers. The driver, a middle-aged black man named Vernon, helped carry Jamal's overnight bag and spoke quietly with Darius about tomorrow's schedule. Jamal caught fragments, 8:30 departure, and make sure the car's spotless, and something about sending a message. The hotel room was bigger than Jamal's entire apartment. 2 beds with white comforters that looked like clouds, a bathroom with a tub and separate shower, a desk where Darius immediately set up his laptop and began making calls. Order room service, his uncle said, pointing to a leather-bound menu. Whatever you want. I've got work to do. Jamal ordered a cheeseburger he barely touched while his uncle worked. Darius made call after call, his voice shifting between warmth and ice depending on who answered. Jamal heard phrases like institutional investor meeting and portfolio review. and significant concerns about branch operations. At midnight, Darius finally closed his laptop. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Uncle D? Jamal was already in bed, staring at the ceiling. Why are you doing all this? I mean, I know Grandma was your sister, but you barely knew me before she died. You could just transfer the money to a different bank and forget about it. Darius sat on the edge of Jamal's bed, his expression softening. Your grandmother raised me when our mother couldn't. She was 16 and I was 9, and she worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. She sacrificed her teenage years so I could have a childhood. Everything I am, everything I've built, it started with her believing in me when nobody else did. He reached over and straightened the collar of Jamal's pajamas. She told me about you, how smart you are, how kind, how you helped her grade papers when her arthritis got bad, and read to her when the cancer treatments made her too tired to focus. She said you were going to change the world someday. She said that about everybody, Jamal mumbled. No. Darius's voice was firm. She saw potential in everybody, but she only said that about people she knew would follow through. You're one of them, which is why tomorrow we're going to make sure that bank understands who they were actually dealing with when they locked you in that room. Sleep came slowly. Jamal drifted in and out, dreaming about marble lobbies that turned into mazes, about Hannah Pike's pitying smile, about his grandmother's handwriting blurring and reforming into words he couldn't read. He woke to find Uncle Darius already dressed, a navy suit this time, with a burgundy tie and shoes that gleamed like black mirrors. It was 7:30 a.m. Shower and get dressed, Darius said. Wear your nicest clothes. I don't really have nice clothes. His uncle opened the closet and pulled out a garment bag Jamal hadn't noticed the night before. I stopped at a store before coming here. Should be your size. Inside was a complete outfit. Dress pants, a button-down shirt, a sweater vest, and new shoes that actually fit. Jamal stared at the price tag still attached and felt something tighten in his chest. This was more than nice clothes. This was armor. Why? He asked quietly. Because perception matters. Darius helped him with the tie, his fingers quick and practiced. Yesterday they saw a poor black kid in worn-out shoes. Today, they're going to see something different. Not better. You were never less than them, Jamal, but different. And that difference is going to make them very uncomfortable. Vernon picked them up at 8:30 sharp. The town car was indeed spotless, every surface gleaming. As they drove toward Merchant Street, Darius made one more call. Marissa, Darius Carter. We're en route. He listened briefly. Good. I'll need the conference room, security footage from yesterday queued up, and Mr. Rourke's personnel file available for review. Also, I want Hannah Pike present. A pause. I understand she's a teller, not management. I still want her there. Another pause. Thank you. See you in 15 minutes. He hung up and looked at Jamal. You ready? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Tell the truth. That's all. No embellishment, no anger, just exactly what happened. Can you do that? Jamal nodded, though his hands were shaking slightly. The town car glided to a stop in front of Granite Trust Bank at 8:57 a.m. Through the windows, Jamal could see the same marble lobby, the same leather furniture, the same gold trim catching the morning light. Vernon opened the door and Darius stepped out first, straightening his cuffs with deliberate precision. Then he reached back and offered Jamal his hand. They walked through the revolving door together. The effect was immediate. The security guard, Reggie Miles, according to his nameplate, looked up from his post and his eyes went wide. A teller helping an early customer faltered mid-sentence. Hannah Pike, standing near the customer service counter with a coffee cup, actually took a step backward. A woman in a charcoal suit emerged from the back offices, late 40s, Asian American with steel gray highlights and an expression that gave nothing away. Mr. Carter, I'm Marissa Cole. She extended her hand to Darius, then smiled at Jamal. And you must be Jamal. Thank you both for coming. Ms. Cole? Darius's handshake was brief and professional. Is everything arranged? Conference room B is ready. Mr. Rourke is waiting. She led them past the main counter, through a security door that required a key card, and down a hallway lined with photographs of the bank's history. Jamal recognized some of the locations. This branch had been here for over a century, serving the community through depressions and recessions and changing neighborhoods. The conference room was all glass walls and dark wood, with a table that could seat 12. Gavin Rourke sat at the far end, his suit slightly less crisp than yesterday, his confidence visibly shaken when Darius walked in. Hannah Pike sat to his left, looking like she wanted to disappear into her chair. "Mr. Rourke," Darius didn't offer his hand. "I believe you've met my nephew." Gavin's eyes moved from Darius's expensive suit to his Patek Philippe watch to the leather briefcase that probably cost more than a month of his salary. The calculation was visible on his face. This wasn't what he'd expected. "Mr. Carter, Yes, there was an incident yesterday involving some account verification issues." "Incident." Darius set his briefcase on the table with a soft thud. Interesting word choice. "Marissa, have you reviewed the security footage?" "I have." She picked up a remote and gestured to the screen on the wall. "I think it would be valuable for everyone to watch together." The footage started at 2:17 p.m., according to the timestamp. Jamal watched himself walk into the frame, small, uncertain, clutching his grandmother's envelope. He saw himself join the line, saw Hannah's expression when she looked at him, heard her voice through the security system speakers, "Can I help you?" The room was silent as the footage played. Jamal's polite request, Hannah's skepticism. The moment she called for Gavin, his emergence from the office, the snatching of the envelope, the laughter that had carried across the lobby. "Turn it up," Darius said quietly. Marissa increased the volume. Gavin's voice filled the conference room. "You walk in here with a premium banking card that has a $50,000 minimum balance requirement, wearing shoes that are falling apart, and you expect us to believe it's yours?" Jamal felt his face burning. On screen, his 10-year-old self was trying not to cry. The footage continued. The suggestion that Eleanor's savings were suspicious. The walk to the verification room. 43 minutes of Jamal sitting alone in that oatmeal-colored space while Gavin made calls and Hannah returned to serving other customers. When it ended, the conference room was absolutely silent. "Mr. Rourke," Marissa said, her voice carefully neutral, "your report from yesterday claims the minor presented fraudulent documentation and became verbally aggressive when questioned. The footage shows something different." "I was following protocol for suspicious accounts." Gavin's voice had lost some of its smoothness. "The accumulation pattern raised red flags, and you called a grieving child a thief in front of a lobby full of customers." Darius's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. "You questioned whether his deceased grandmother, a woman who devoted 37 years to teaching elementary school, earned her money legally. You locked him in a room for over 40 minutes while you decided whether to believe him. That's your protocol?" "We have to be careful about—" "Let me tell you what you have to be careful about." Darius opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Granite Trust Bank manages approximately $14 billion in assets. Your institutional investment division handles portfolios for pension funds, endowments, and private equity firms. One of those firms is Carter Capital Group. We currently have $230 million invested through your institution. The color drained from Gavin's face. "Yesterday, you humiliated my nephew because you made assumptions based on his age and his appearance. You saw a black child in worn shoes and decided he must be lying, must be stealing, couldn't possibly have legitimate access to a substantial account. You never even checked the account details before calling security. You were trying to protect your own bias." Darius pulled out another document. "I had my team pull Eleanor Carter's complete banking history overnight. Every deposit is documented. Salary transfers from the school district, summer tutoring payments, substitute teaching fees, all legal, all reported, all taxed appropriately. She started this account in 1988 with $500 and added to it monthly for 37 years. The compound interest alone is remarkable. She was a better investor than half my analysts." He slid the document across the table to Gavin. "There's nothing suspicious here except your assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly have saved this much money honestly." Gavin opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did." Darius turned to Hannah. "Ms. Pike, tell me what you saw when my nephew walked into this bank yesterday." Hannah's voice came out barely above a whisper. "A child? And what did you assume about that child?" She was silent. "Ms. Pike, I'm trying to understand what happened here. Help me understand. I assumed, Hannah swallowed hard. I assumed he didn't belong. That someone sent him in with a card he didn't understand. I thought I was being helpful by catching it before he got in trouble. You thought you were saving him from himself. Darius's tone wasn't cruel, but it was relentless. Did you consider that maybe, just maybe, he knew exactly what he was doing? That his grandmother had prepared him for this moment? That he had every right to walk into this bank and receive the same respect you'd give any other customer? No, I didn't think about that. Marissa spoke up. Mr. Carter, I want to assure you that this behavior doesn't reflect our institutional values. We've scheduled additional training on implicit bias for all customer-facing staff, and training. Darius's laugh was sharp. Marissa, with all due respect, training doesn't fix this. This isn't a knowledge gap. Everyone in this room knows that judging people by their appearance is wrong. They just chose not to apply that knowledge yesterday when it mattered. Stood, and the room seemed to shrink around him. I'm withdrawing Carter Capital Group's funds from Granite Trust. All $230 million. It'll take 60 days to complete the transfer, but the decision is final. Gavin actually stood up. Mr. Carter, please, if this is about yesterday, I can assure you that I'll personally apologize to your nephew. And sit down. The command was quiet but absolute. Gavin sat. This isn't about an apology, Darius continued. This is about judgment. You had a choice yesterday when you saw a 10-year-old boy with a premium banking card and a story about his grandmother's account. You could have taken 5 minutes to verify his claims before humiliating him. You could have shown him basic human decency while you investigated. Instead, you chose spectacle. You chose to make him an example in front of your lobby. You chose to protect your assumptions instead of protecting a child. He walked around the table until he was standing directly across from Gavin. People like you are why people like my sister had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. She taught hundreds of children over her career. Some of them became doctors, lawyers, engineers. One of them invented a medical device that saved thousands of lives. But she died in a one-bedroom apartment with furniture from thrift stores because every extra dollar went into that account you called suspicious. Darius's voice dropped lower. She did that because she knew Jamal would face people like you his entire life. People who would see his skin before his character. Who would assume incompetence before investigating excellence. She wanted to give him a foundation strong enough to survive that. And yesterday, you tried to take it away from him. The silence stretched out. Hannah was crying quietly. Reggie Miles, who'd been called in to give his statement, was staring at the table. Marissa's expression hadn't changed, but something in her eyes suggested she was recalculating everything. Mr. Carter? Gavin's voice was hoarse. I made a mistake. A serious mistake. If there's any way to… There isn't. Darius picked up his briefcase. Marissa, I assume you'll handle the account transfer personally? I want Jamal's full inheritance moved to an institution that will treat him with the respect his grandmother earned. Of course. Marissa stood as well. Jamal, I am deeply sorry for your experience. You deserved better from us. Darius looked at his nephew. Anything you want to say? Jamal had been quiet through the whole meeting, watching these adults dissect what had happened to him, turning his humiliation into a case study. Now they were all looking at him. Gavin with barely concealed panic, Hannah with shame, Marissa with careful professionalism, his uncle with quiet support. He thought about his grandmother's letter, about respect being something you deserved just for being human. I just wanted to check my balance, he said finally. That's all I wanted, and you made me feel like I was doing something wrong just by existing. The words hung in the air. Simple. True. Unanswerable. Darius put his hand on Jamal's shoulder. We're done here. They walked out of the conference room together, through the hallway with its history photographs, past the security door, into the marble lobby where yesterday Jamal had been laughed at. A few early customers looked up. The same security guard watched them pass. Hannah's coffee cup still sat on the customer service counter, probably cold by now. Vernon was waiting outside with the town car. As they drove away, Jamal looked back at the bank one last time, glass and marble and gold trim, looking exactly the same as yesterday, as permanent and unchangeable as a mountain. But mountains did change. Slowly, invisibly, worn down by forces they never saw coming. Uncle D? Jamal's voice was quiet. What happens now? To them, I mean. Darius was silent for a moment, watching the city pass by outside. Gavin will probably be fired. Hannah might be reassigned. The bank will do damage control. And in a few months, it'll be like it never happened. That's not fair. No, his uncle agreed. It's not. Real change takes time, requires constant pressure. But yesterday, they saw you as someone they could dismiss. Today, they'll remember you as the person who cost them $230 million. That's not justice exactly, but it's a start. The car pulled up to the hotel. Darius had a flight back to New York that afternoon, meetings he'd already rescheduled once. But first, breakfast in the hotel restaurant, pancakes and bacon and orange juice that was fresh squeezed and probably cost more per glass than Jamal's usual breakfast for a week. What should I do with the money? Jamal asked between bites. When it gets transferred, Grandma said college, but that's like 8 years away. Leave it invested. Let it grow. Your grandmother was patient. She understood that wealth isn't built overnight. Darius poured more syrup on his pancakes. But Jamal? The money matters less than the lesson. You're going to face more Gavin Rourkes in your life, more Hannah Pikes. People who will make assumptions about you before you open your mouth. Some of them will have power over you. Not all those fights will end like this one did. So what do I do? You remember who you are. You remember that your worth isn't determined by whether someone else recognizes it. And when you have the power, you make sure the next kid who walks into that bank wearing worn-out shoes gets treated like a human being. He met Jamal's eyes. Your grandmother spent her life teaching children. Now it's your turn to learn what she was really teaching. That dignity isn't negotiable. Not for anyone. Not ever. They finished breakfast. Darius packed his things, gave Jamal his direct number with instructions to call any time, and headed for the airport. Vernon drove Jamal back to the apartment, helped him carry his bag upstairs, and left him with a business card and a quiet piece of advice. Your uncle's a good man, but he's tough. The world made him that way. Don't let it do the same to you. Jamal spent the rest of the day in the quiet apartment, thinking about yesterday and today, about marble lobbies and oatmeal-colored rooms, about his grandmother's handwriting and his uncle's controlled fury. His phone buzzed around 6 p.m. A text from an unknown number. This is Marissa Cole. I wanted to inform you that Gavin Rourke has been suspended pending a full review of his conduct. You'll receive formal communication about your account transfer within 48 hours. Again, my deepest apologies. Jamal deleted the message. Apologies were easy, they cost nothing and changed less. What would change things was what came next. The formal communication arrived exactly 48 hours later, delivered by courier in a cream-colored envelope with the Granite Trust logo embossed in gold. Jamal signed for it, closed the door, and sat at the kitchen table where his grandmother's reading glasses still waited for hands that would never pick them up again. Inside was a letter on heavy paper stock, the kind that whispered money and importance. It confirmed the transfer of Eleanor Carter's account to Riverside Community Bank, effective immediately. All $487,263 would be available within 5 business days. There was also a personal note, handwritten on smaller stationery. Jamal, I know my words cannot undo the harm caused to you. I have reviewed every aspect of what happened at our branch, and I am ashamed. Please know that changes are being implemented to ensure this never happens to another child. Your grandmother would be proud of your strength. Marissa Cole. Jamal folded the note and put it in the drawer with takeout menus and expired coupons. Strength wasn't what he'd felt in that oatmeal-colored room. But maybe that was the point. Maybe real strength was surviving the moment when you felt weakest. School started again on Monday. Jamal walked the familiar route, past the corner store where Mr. Kim always had day-old pastries on sale, past the community center where his grandmother had volunteered on weekends, past the bus stop where high school kids gathered to smoke cigarettes they thought adults didn't know about. Normal. Ordinary. The world continuing like nothing had changed. except everything had changed. His homeroom teacher, Ms. Washington, pulled him aside before first period. "Jamal, I heard about your grandmother's passing. I'm so sorry, honey. Eleanor was one of the finest educators I ever met. She taught me, actually, back in second grade." "She taught everybody," Jamal said, trying to smile. "She did. And she talked about you all the time in the teacher's lounge, bragged about your grades, your reading level, how you helped her prepare lessons when her arthritis got bad." Ms. Washington squeezed his shoulder gently. "If you need anything, you let me know. Extra time on assignments, someone to talk to, whatever. Okay?" "Okay. Thanks." But what he needed wasn't something Ms. Washington could give him. What he needed was to stop seeing Gavin Rourke's face every time he closed his eyes, to stop hearing Hannah Pike's pitying voice, to stop feeling like the world was full of rooms designed to make him small. At lunch, his best friend Marcus Chen slid into the seat across from him with a tray loaded with pizza and chocolate milk. "Yo, where were you Friday? You missed the assembly about internet safety. It was boring as hell." "Had some stuff to deal with." Jamal picked at his own lunch, not really hungry. "Family stuff?" "Yeah." Marcus knew about Grandma Eleanor. He'd come to the funeral, standing awkwardly in his only suit while Jamal's uncle gave the eulogy. But Jamal hadn't told him about the bank, about Gavin and Hannah and the verification room. Somehow putting it into words for Marcus would make it too real, too permanent. "You good, though?" Marcus asked, his voice losing its usual joking tone. "I'm fine, just tired." It was easier than the truth. The week crawled by. Classes, homework, lunch with Marcus. The rhythms of fifth grade continuing like the bank incident existed in a different universe. But on Thursday afternoon, Jamal's phone buzzed during math class. He snuck a look under his desk. Unknown number. A text message. "This is Reggie Miles. I was the security guard at Granite Trust. Can we talk?" Jamal stared at the screen until Mrs. Palmer asked if he needed to share something with the class. He shook his head and put the phone away, but the message stayed in his mind through the rest of the period, through science, through the bus ride home. Reggie Miles. The security guard who'd watched everything happen and done nothing. What could he possibly want to talk about? At home, Jamal texted back, "How did you get my number?" The response came immediately. "Ms. Cole gave it to me. Said you might be willing to hear me out. I understand if you're not, but I'd appreciate the chance to explain. There's a coffee shop on Bennett Street, Morgan's. I could meet you there Saturday at 2 p.m. if you want. You can bring an adult if that makes you more comfortable." Jamal showed the texts to Uncle Darius during their nightly phone call. "What do you want to do?" his uncle asked. "I don't know. Why would he want to talk to me?" "Maybe he's guilty. Maybe he wants to apologize. Maybe he's looking for absolution." Darius's voice was thoughtful. "Or maybe he has something useful to say. You're called, Jamal, but if you do meet him, I want you to take someone with you, an adult you trust. Can't you fly back?" "I'm in London until next week. Client meetings I can't reschedule. But what about your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson? Didn't you say Eleanor trusted her?" Mrs. Patterson was 72 and had lived in the apartment below theirs for as long as Jamal could remember. She'd brought casseroles after the funeral and checked on him every evening. Grandma Eleanor had helped her with her taxes every year and kept a spare key to her place in case of emergencies. Yeah, she'd probably do it. Then ask her. And Jamal? If this Reggie guy says anything that makes you uncomfortable, you walk out. Understood? Understood. Saturday arrived cold and gray, the kind of day that threatened snow but never delivered. Mrs. Patterson wore her church coat and carried her purse like a weapon as they walked to Morgan's coffee shop. "If this man upset you," she said firmly, "I will make sure he regrets it. Your grandmother was my best friend for 20 years, and I won't have anyone troubling her grandson." "He didn't really do anything," Jamal said. "That's kind of the problem. Morgan's was a small place tucked between a laundromat and a tax preparation office, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Reggie Miles sat at a corner table, a coffee cup in front of him, and a nervous expression on his face. He was maybe 50, with gray at his temples and hands that looked like they'd worked hard for a long time. He stood when they approached. "Jamal, thank you for coming. And you must be Mrs. Patterson. I'm here to make sure this conversation stays appropriate." "Yes, ma'am, I appreciate that." He gestured to the chairs. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Hot chocolate? We're fine, Mrs. Patterson said crisply, settling into her chair with the air of a judge taking the bench. Reggie sat back down, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup like he needed the warmth. I guess I should start by saying I'm sorry for what happened at the bank, for not stepping in when I should have. You were there the whole time, Jamal said quietly. You saw everything. I did, and I told myself I was staying out of it because it wasn't my place to interfere with management decisions. That's what I told myself. He took a breath. The truth is, I was scared. I'm 53 years old, Jamal. I've got a daughter in college and a son in high school. I've been a security guard for 26 years. The pay isn't great, but it's steady, and it's got benefits. I was 3 years from retirement when I watched Gavin Rourke humiliate you. So you stayed quiet to protect your job? Mrs. Patterson's voice could have cut glass. Yes, ma'am, I did. And I've been thinking about that every day since. Reggie looked at Jamal directly. I told myself that I was just following orders, that it wasn't my responsibility to fix what management broke. But I watched that security footage with Ms. Cole, and I saw your face when Gavin laughed at you, and I realized something. He paused, searching for words. I've got a grandson, Marcus. He's 8. Smart kid, loves dinosaurs, wants to be a paleontologist. He's got my daughter's light skin, passes for white most of the time. But one day, he's going to be in a situation like yours, where someone makes assumptions about him, and he's going to look around for someone to help him. And if the person who could help stays quiet to protect their job, my grandson is going to learn the same lesson you learned, that the system protects itself, not kids. I appreciate the apology, Jamal said carefully, but I don't understand why you wanted to meet. You're not at the bank anymore? No, I resigned. Ms. Cole tried to talk me out of it, said I wasn't responsible for management's actions, but I couldn't stay. Every time I put on that uniform, I'd remember watching you sit in that room for 43 minutes while I did nothing. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket. I wrote something, a statement about what I witnessed, what I should have done, what I'm going to do differently. Ms. Cole is including it in the final report to corporate, but I wanted you to have a copy too. Jamal took the paper. Mrs. Patterson leaned over to read it with him. The statement was detailed and unflinching. Reggie described every moment of what happened, including his own failure to intervene. He outlined how he'd rationalized his inaction, how he'd told himself it wasn't his place, how protecting his job had seemed more important than protecting a child. And at the end, he made a promise. I will not be silent again. I will not allow fear of consequences to prevent me from doing what's right. I will teach my own grandchildren that complicity is a choice, and I choose differently starting now. This is good, Mrs. Patterson said grudgingly, but words on paper are easy, Mr. Miles. What matters is what you do next. I know. That's the other reason I wanted to meet. Reggie pulled out another paper. I've been hired as a community liaison at Roosevelt Middle School. It's where I went as a kid and where my daughter went. The principal, Dr. Martinez, is trying to build better relationships between students and security staff. Teaching kids that authority figures should be people they can trust, not people they have to fear. I thought maybe I could turn what happened into something useful, help other kids avoid what you went through. Jamal stared at the job description. It was a pay cut from his banking job, he noticed. Less prestige, but something in Reggie's expression suggested he'd found something more valuable than prestige. I don't need to forgive you, Jamal said slowly. I don't think forgiveness works that way. You did something wrong, and saying sorry doesn't erase it. No, it doesn't. But I'm glad you're trying to do better, for your grandson, for other kids. He folded the paper and handed it back. Keep that promise you made. That's what matters. Reggie's eyes were bright. I will. I swear I will. They left the coffee shop a few minutes later, Mrs. Patterson's hand firm on Jamal's shoulder as they walked back through the gray afternoon. Your grandmother would be proud of you, she said quietly. You could have been angry. You had every right to be angry. But you gave that man what he needed. Not forgiveness, but a chance to be better. Do you think he will be? Better, I mean? I think he'll try. That's all any of us can do. The next week brought an envelope from Riverside Community Bank. Inside was a new debit card with Jamal's name embossed on it, an account number, and a welcome letter from the branch manager personally introducing herself and providing her direct phone number. There was also a small note. Jamal, we're honored to serve you and to continue your grandmother's legacy. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. You are valued here. It was signed by 3 people, the branch manager, the head teller, and the security supervisor. Like they wanted to make absolutely sure he knew he mattered. The account was real now. The money was accessible. Jamal could theoretically walk into any ATM and withdraw cash, buy things online, make purchases at stores. The power was strange and heavy, like carrying something breakable. He didn't touch it. Instead, he went to the library after school one day and asked the librarian, Mr. Thompson, to help him understand investment accounts. Mr. Thompson pulled up websites, explained compound interest, showed him calculators that demonstrated how money could grow over time if you left it alone and let it work. Your grandmother was playing the long game, Mr. Thompson said, impressed by the numbers. She understood that wealth isn't about spending, it's about patience and discipline. You know what this means for your future? College, Jamal said. That's what she wanted. College, graduate school, maybe your own business someday. You've got options most kids your age can't imagine. That's a gift. It was a gift, but it was also a weight, because every time Jamal thought about the money, he thought about the price his grandmother had paid to save it. The vacations she'd never taken, the car she'd driven for 20 years, the thrift store furniture and bargain groceries, and every small sacrifice that added up to $487,263. She'd built this for him, and using it frivolously would dishonor every sacrifice she'd made. 2 weeks after the meeting with Reggie, an unexpected visitor arrived at the apartment. Jamal answered the door to find Hannah Pike standing in the hallway, looking smaller somehow than she had behind the bank counter. She wasn't wearing the navy suit or the professional makeup, just jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Hi," she said nervously. "I know I probably shouldn't be here, but I wanted to talk to you, if that's okay." Jamal hesitated. Mrs. Patterson was downstairs, but he could hear her television through the floor. "I guess. Can we sit out here?" Hannah gestured to the hallway stairs. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable by being in your space." They sat on the top step, the stairwell quiet except for distant sounds of other people's lives, a baby crying, someone's music playing, the hum of the building's old heating system. "I don't work at Granite Trust anymore," Hannah said. "I resigned. Ms. Cole offered to let me stay, said I could work at a different branch, but I couldn't. Every time I looked at that counter, I saw your face." "Okay." Jamal didn't know what else to say. "I've been thinking a lot about why I acted the way I did. Why I looked at you and assumed the worst instead of just doing my job and checking the account. And I realized something." She pulled at a loose thread on her sweater. "I was taught to be helpful. My whole life, teachers and parents told me I was a nice person, a helpful person. And I believed it. But helpful to who, right? Because I was plenty helpful to the customers who looked like me, who dressed like me, who fit what I expected a banking customer to look like." "What are you doing now?" Jamal asked. "For work, I mean." "I'm a teacher's aide at an elementary school. Riverside, actually, where your grandmother taught." Hannah smiled sadly. "The pay is terrible compared to banking, but one of the teachers there, Mrs. Chen, she remembered your grandmother. Said Eleanor was the kind of teacher who made sure every kid felt seen, no matter what. That got me thinking about what it means to actually see people." "Did you know her, my grandmother?" "No, but I've been reading her evaluations in the school's archive. Every single one talks about how she treated students with dignity, how she never made assumptions about what they could accomplish, how she saw potential in kids other teachers had given up on." Hannah's voice cracked slightly. "She would have been so disappointed in me." "Yeah," Jamal said quietly. "She would have." Hannah flinched, but nodded. "I know, and I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know that it changed me. Watching that security footage, seeing how I treated you, realizing that my helpfulness was really just prejudice with a smile on it. I'm trying to be better, trying to actually see kids the way your grandmother did." "That's good," Jamal said, and meant it. "I also wanted to give you something." She pulled out a small envelope. "It's not much, but I found out there's a scholarship fund being set up in your grandmother's name. The school district is matching donations. I contributed what I could. It's not about making myself feel better. I know that doesn't work that way. It's about trying to honor what she built." Inside the envelope was a receipt for a donation, $200. For someone who'd just taken a major pay cut, it was significant. "Thank you," Jamal said. They sat in silence for a moment, then Hannah stood. "I should go. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm trying to learn from what I did wrong. That's all." She walked down the stairs and out of the building, leaving Jamal alone with his thoughts. The scholarship fund news was real. A week later, the school district sent out a press release announcing the Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing careers in education. The initial funding came from the district, but donations were already coming in, from former students, from community members, from people who remembered a teacher who'd seen them when others hadn't. Jamal's phone rang that evening. Uncle Darius, calling from New York. "Did you see the news about the scholarship?" "Yeah, it's pretty cool." "Cool?" Darius laughed. "Jamal, do you understand what this means? Your grandmother taught for 37 years. Let's say she had 25 students per year. That's over 900 kids whose lives she touched. Some of them are going to donate. Some of them are going to tell their own kids about her. This scholarship could help dozens of students over the next few decades. That's her legacy continuing." "I guess I hadn't thought about it that way." "Well, think about it now, because I've been doing some thinking too." His uncle's voice shifted to something more serious. "The money your grandmother left you, it's yours. You can use it however you want, but I had an idea, if you're interested." "What kind of idea?" "What if we match the scholarship fund? Put in $50,000 to get it really established. Make sure it's around for the long term. Your grandmother spent her life investing in kids. This would be a way to keep that investment going." $50,000. It was a tenth of the total account, but it still seemed like an impossible amount of money. Jamal thought about his grandmother driving her old car, shopping at thrift stores, saying no to small luxuries so she could say yes to his future. "Would that be okay?" he asked. "Using her money for something else?" "Jamal, her money was never really about the money. It was about possibilities, about creating opportunities. A scholarship fund does exactly that. It gives other kids possibilities they wouldn't have otherwise." Darius paused. "But it's your decision. Take your time. Think about it." Jamal thought about it for 3 days. He thought about Gavin Rourke assuming his grandmother's savings were suspicious. He thought about Hannah Pike learning to actually see students. He thought about Reggie Miles promising to speak up next time. He thought about kids he'd never meet, kids who might need help affording college, kids who might become teachers because someone believed in them enough to make it possible. On the 4th day, he called his uncle back. "I want to do it. The scholarship fund. $50,000. "You're sure?" "Yeah, Grandma spent her life teaching kids. This just keeps teaching them, even though she's not here anymore." "All right then. I'll work with the district to set it up properly. Make sure it's managed well, that the money goes to students who really need it." His uncle's voice was warm with something that might have been pride. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you, Jamal." After they hung up, Jamal sat in the quiet apartment and felt something shift inside him. The anger from the bank was still there. It probably always would be. The hurt of being judged, dismissed, humiliated. But alongside it now was something else. A sense that maybe pain didn't have to be wasted, that maybe the worst moments could become fuel for something better. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Yo, you want to come over? My dad's making tacos." Normal life, continuing. Friends and homework and tacos. The everyday rhythms that made the bigger moments survivable. "Yeah," Jamal texted back. "Be there in 20. He grabbed his jacket, still the same thin one from that day at the bank, though Uncle Darius kept threatening to buy him a new one, and headed for the door. On the kitchen table, his grandmother's reading glasses caught the late afternoon light, still waiting. He touched them gently, a promise without words, and went to have dinner with his friend. Marcus's apartment smelled like cumin and cilantro, the kind of warmth that came from actual cooking instead of microwave dinners. His dad, Mr. Chen, was at the stove flipping tortillas while Marcus set the table with mismatched plates that somehow made the whole scene feel more real, more lived in. "Jamal, good to see you, buddy." Mr. Chen waved a spatula in greeting. You hungry? I made enough to feed an army. Thanks, Mr. Chen. They ate at the small dining table, Marcus complaining about their history teacher's impossible timeline assignments, Mr. Chen telling stories about his own fifth-grade disasters, the conversation flowing around Jamal like a river he could just float in without having to contribute much. It was exactly what he needed. After dinner, Marcus pulled him into his room, where posters of basketball players competed for wall space with detailed drawings of manga characters. So what's been up with you? You've been weird lately. Just stuff with my grandmother's estate. Legal things. It wasn't entirely a lie. That sucks. At least it's almost done, right? Yeah, almost done. But that night, lying in his own bed and staring at the ceiling, Jamal realized it wasn't almost done at all. The bank incident had ended, sure. The money was transferred, apologies were made, people were fired or resigned. But the thing that had started in that marble lobby was still unfolding, still rippling outward in ways he couldn't predict. The scholarship fund announcement hit the local news 2 weeks later. Not major coverage, just a 3-minute segment on the evening broadcast about community investment in education. They showed a photo of Grandma Eleanor from her retirement party, her smile wide and genuine as she stood surrounded by former students who'd come to celebrate her. The reporter interviewed the school district superintendent, who spoke about Eleanor's decades of service and the impact she'd had on countless children. The Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship will provide financial assistance to students pursuing careers in education, the superintendent said into the camera. It's a fitting tribute to a woman who dedicated her life to ensuring every child had access to quality teaching. Jamal's phone exploded with messages. Classmates who'd never talked to him before suddenly wanted to know if that was his grandmother. Teachers sent condolences. Even Ms. Washington pulled him aside the next day to tell him how beautiful the tribute was. But it was a message from an unknown number that stopped him cold. Jamal, this is Gavin Rourke. I saw the news about the scholarship fund. I wanted to reach out because I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last meeting. I know I don't deserve your time, but I'd like to talk if you're willing. I have something to tell you about what happened that day. Something I should have said from the beginning. Jamal stared at the message for a full minute before screenshotting it and sending it to Uncle Darius. The response came within seconds. Do not respond. I'll handle this. 10 minutes later, his uncle called. That man has a lot of nerve contacting you directly. What do you think he wants? Probably absolution. Maybe he's trying to get ahead of something. Either way, you don't owe him anything. Darius's voice was firm. I'm going to have our lawyers send a cease and desist. He shouldn't be reaching out to you at all. But what if he actually has something important to say? Jamal surprised himself with the question. What if there's more to the story? Then he can say it to our lawyers, not to a 10-year-old kid. His uncle sighed. Jamal, I know you want to believe the best in people. Your grandmother raised you that way. But some people don't deserve that benefit of the doubt. Gavin Rourke humiliated you in public, questioned your grandmother's integrity, and only showed remorse when he realized there would be consequences. He doesn't get to use you to make himself feel better. The lawyer's letter went out the next day. Jamal didn't hear from Gavin again, but 3 days later, a package arrived at the apartment. No return address, just Jamal's name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a letter and a thick folder of documents. Mrs. Patterson was visiting when he opened it, and she immediately reached for the papers. Let me look at those first, make sure it's safe. The letter was typed, formal, and began with an apology. Jamal, I understand you've been advised not to communicate with me, and I respect that. I'm sending this through a third party to avoid violating the cease and desist. What I have to tell you isn't about making myself feel better. It's about giving you information you deserve to have. Information that changes the context of what happened that day at the bank. Mrs. Patterson's expression darkened as she read further. This man has some nerve. What does it say? She hesitated, then handed him the letter. You should read it yourself. But Jamal, remember that people will say anything to justify their actions. Jamal read. Gavin's letter explained that the day before Jamal had walked into Granite Trust, he'd received a directive from corporate headquarters. They were cracking down on suspicious deposits following a federal investigation into money laundering at a sister branch. All premium accounts were being flagged for additional scrutiny, especially those with unusual deposit patterns. He'd been told explicitly to be aggressive in questioning customers, to prioritize security over service. When you walked in, the letter continued, I was already on edge. I'd flagged 3 accounts that morning and gotten reprimanded by a customer who threatened to report me to the regional director. I was trying to prove I was taking the directive seriously. When I saw you, a child with a premium card, my first thought wasn't about you personally. It was about covering myself with corporate, proving I was being vigilant. The letter went on to acknowledge that none of this excused his behavior, that he should have handled it differently, that his fear of corporate reprimand didn't justify humiliating a child, but he wanted Jamal to know that the cruelty wasn't personal, it was institutional. The bank's culture of paranoia and punishment had created an environment where employees felt pressured to assume the worst about customers. I'm not asking for forgiveness, the letter concluded. I'm providing context, because the problem at Granite Trust wasn't just me. It was a system that taught us to see threats instead of people. And until that system changes, other kids like you will walk into other banks and get treated the same way. The folder contained copies of the corporate directive, email chains showing pressure from management to flag more accounts, and documentation of other incidents where customers had been treated with suspicion. There was even a memo from regional management praising branches that had successfully identified suspicious activity, with bonus structures tied to the number of reports filed. Mrs. Patterson read through the documents with increasing anger. This is unconscionable. They incentivized this behavior, made it profitable to suspect people. Jamal felt something cold settling in his stomach. So it wasn't just Gavin being mean. The bank wanted him to be suspicious. The bank created a culture where being suspicious was rewarded, Mrs. Patterson corrected. But Gavin still chose how to express that suspicion. He could have been professional. Instead, he made a spectacle of you. She was right, but the documents added layers to what Jamal had thought was a simple story of one bad person doing a bad thing. It was bigger than Gavin, bigger than Granite Trust. It was a system that treated people like potential criminals and rewarded employees for finding threats. He called Uncle Darius that evening and read the letter aloud, along with details from the documents. His uncle was silent for a long moment. That son of a... He caught himself. Jamal, this is important. This changes things. Not about Gavin's personal responsibility. He still made the choice to humiliate you, but it exposes something bigger. What do we do with it? We give it to someone who can do something about it. A journalist, maybe? Or a banking regulator. This kind of institutional pressure is exactly how discrimination gets baked into systems. It's not just individual bias, it's policies that encourage that bias. Darius's voice took on an edge of excitement. Your grandmother's story wasn't just about one bad manager. It was about a bank that created bad managers by design. The next week moved fast. Uncle Darius connected with a journalist at the city's major newspaper, a woman named Jennifer Park, who'd won awards for her financial industry reporting. She interviewed Jamal with his uncle present, asking careful questions about what happened at the bank, how it made him feel, what he wished had been different. Can I see those documents Gavin sent? She asked. Jamal handed over the folder. Jennifer read through them with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. This is explosive. These emails basically admit they were pressuring employees to profile customers. The bonus structure tied to suspicious activity reports? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Can you publish it? Darius asked. I need to verify everything first. Talk to other employees, get the bank's official response, check with regulatory experts about whether this violates any banking laws. She looked at Jamal. But yes, I think this is a story the public needs to hear, and I'll make sure your grandmother is portrayed accurately, not as someone suspicious, but as a dedicated educator whose savings were questioned because of systemic bias. The article ran on a Sunday, front page of the business section with the headline, Local Bank's Incentive Structure Encouraged Customer Profiling, Documents Show. It included Jamal's story, but also accounts from 3 other customers who'd been treated with suspicion at Granite Trust branches. An elderly Vietnamese woman whose cash deposits from her nail salon were flagged as suspicious. A young Latino man whose construction business checks were questioned. A black couple trying to deposit their wedding gift money who were asked to prove where it came from. The pattern was clear. Customers of color were being subjected to additional scrutiny, and the bank's own policies were encouraging it. The response was immediate and explosive. By Monday morning, social media was full of people sharing their own experiences at Granite Trust. Former employees came forward with stories about the pressure they'd faced to file suspicious activity reports, about quotas that seemed impossible to meet honestly, about managers who praised aggressive questioning of certain customers while facilitating smooth service for others. The state banking regulator announced an investigation. Granite Trust's stock price dropped 6%, and 3 major institutional investors, including 2 pension funds, announced they were reviewing their relationships with the bank pending the outcome of the investigation. Marissa Cole released a statement on behalf of Granite Trust. "We take these allegations seriously and are conducting a comprehensive internal review of our policies and practices. Any employee found to have violated our commitment to equal treatment of all customers will face appropriate consequences. We are also retaining an independent consultant to review our incentive structures and ensure they align with our values." It was carefully worded corporate speak, but the message underneath was clear. They were scared. The bad publicity was hurting them in ways that went beyond one withdrawn investment. Jamal watched it unfold from the relative safety of school and home, his life continuing in its ordinary rhythms even as his name appeared in newspaper articles and online comments. Some people praised his courage. Others accused him of trying to get attention or money. A few said terrible things that Uncle Darius made sure he never saw, though Jamal caught glimpses when he searched his own name late at night when he couldn't sleep. "You need to stop reading the comments," Marcus told him one day at lunch. "My dad says internet comments are where brain cells go to die. I just want to know what people are saying. People are saying you're brave. People are saying the bank sucks. People are saying all kinds of stuff because that's what people do. They talk. But none of it changes what actually happened or what you actually did." Marcus stole a French fry from Jamal's tray. "You stood up for your grandma. That's what matters." Standing up felt like too strong a phrase for what had actually happened. Jamal had just wanted to check his account balance. Everything else, the confrontation, the media coverage, the investigation, had happened to him more than because of him. But maybe that was how change worked sometimes. You just tried to do a simple thing, and the world's reaction to that simple thing revealed all the broken systems that needed fixing. The scholarship fund received a surge of donations after the article ran. Former students who'd lost touch decades ago sent checks with notes about how Mrs. Carter had changed their lives. Community organizations contributed. Even some people who'd never met Eleanor but were moved by the story sent donations. Within 2 weeks, the fund had grown from 50,000 to almost 200,000. "This is remarkable," the school district's development director told Jamal during a meeting Uncle Darius had set up. "At this level of funding, we could award 3 full scholarships per year for students pursuing education degrees. Your grandmother's impact is going to extend to hundreds of future teachers." Jamal looked at the donor list, all these names of people who'd been touched by one elementary school teacher who'd simply chosen to see every child as worthy of respect and attention. It was overwhelming in a way that made his chest tight. "She just did her job," he said quietly. "No," the director corrected gently. "She did her job exceptionally well. There's a difference, and now her legacy is ensuring other people can do the same." On a Tuesday afternoon in late February, Jamal got a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Jamal? This is Elaine Whitaker. I don't know if you remember me, but I was at Granite Trust the day you came in. I was the woman in the fur collar." Jamal's hand tightened on the phone. He remembered, the woman who'd watched his humiliation and then left without a word. "I saw the news coverage," she continued, her voice shaky. "And I couldn't live with myself anymore. I was there. I saw what they did to you, and I walked out. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I didn't want to get involved, but that was cowardice." "Okay." Jamal didn't know what else to say. "I called the banking regulator yesterday, gave a statement about what I witnessed. I described exactly how that manager treated you, how the staff laughed, how nobody intervened. They said my testimony as a neutral witness is valuable for their investigation." She took a breath. "I know it's too late to matter for you, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and I'm trying to do the right thing now, even though I should have done it then." After she hung up, Jamal sat with the phone in his hand, processing. Another person carrying guilt about that day? Another person trying to make amends? He was starting to understand that the real damage of what happened at Granite Trust wasn't just the 43 minutes in that oatmeal-colored room. It was all the ripples spreading outward. Reggie's guilt about staying silent, Hannah's shame about her assumptions, Elaine's regret about walking away, even Gavin's belated attempt to provide context. One afternoon of cruelty had sent fractures through all these lives, forcing everyone to confront what they'd done or failed to do. The difference was, Jamal hadn't had a choice about confronting it. It had been forced on him. Everyone else got to decide later, in safety, whether to face their own complicity. That evening, Uncle Darius called with news. The banking regulator released their preliminary findings. Granite Trust is being fined $3 million for discriminatory practices. They're required to implement new training, revise their incentive structures, and submit to quarterly compliance reviews for the next 3 years. Is that enough? Jamal asked. Enough for what? To actually change things, to make sure it doesn't happen to other kids. His uncle was quiet for a moment. Nothing is ever enough to guarantee change, Jamal. Systems are stubborn. They resist change. But this is significant. It sends a message that there are consequences for institutionalizing bias. Other banks will pay attention. Some will do better because they're afraid of being next. That's not perfect, but it's movement. Grandma used to say that teaching was about planting seeds you might never see grow. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She understood that real change is slow and often invisible. You don't always get to see the outcome of standing up for what's right. Sometimes you just have to trust that you're planting seeds. Darius's voice warmed. But Jamal? In this case, you are seeing some of the growth, the scholarship fund, the investigation, people like Reggie and Hannah trying to be better, Elaine Whitaker finding her courage. That's all because you walked into a bank and insisted on being treated with dignity. I just wanted to check my account. I know, that's what makes it powerful. You didn't set out to change anything. You just refused to accept being treated as less than human. And that refusal, that simple, quiet insistence on dignity, that's what started everything else. After they hung up, Jamal went to the kitchen drawer where he'd stored his grandmother's letter. He read it again. The words familiar now, but still carrying weight. Respect isn't something you earn by having wealth. It's something you deserve by being human. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known he would face exactly this kind of test. She'd prepared him for it with every story she'd told, every lesson she'd taught, every example she'd lived, and she'd given him the resources to fight back when fighting back became necessary. The money mattered, but not the way Gavin Rourke had thought it mattered. It wasn't about buying respect or proving worth. It was about having enough security to stand firm when the world tried to make you small, about having the foundation to weather a crisis without being crushed by it. That night, Jamal did his homework at the kitchen table where his grandmother's reading glasses still sat. Math problems about percentages and fractions. History reading about the civil rights movement and people who'd refused to accept being treated as less than human. English vocabulary words including dignity, justice, and perseverance. The ordinary work of being a fifth grader, continuing alongside the extraordinary weight of everything else. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Yo, did you finish the history reading? I'm so confused about the timeline. Jamal smiled and texted back. Yeah, I can help. Video call in 10? Normal? Ordinary? The small moments that made up a life, even when that life had been touched by something bigger and harder. He called Marcus and spent an hour explaining the sequence of events in the civil rights movement, how change happened through thousands of small actions by ordinary people who just refused to accept injustice. Marcus mostly understood, though he kept getting distracted by his cat trying to sleep on his textbook. After they hung up, Jamal returned to his own reading. There was a quote from Dr. King that his teacher had highlighted. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. His grandmother had believed that, had lived it. And now, through scholarship students who would become teachers, through regulatory changes that would protect other customers, through people like Reggie and Hannah and Elaine who were trying to be better, her belief was spreading. Jamal touched the reading glasses gently, a habit he'd developed over the past weeks, a way of feeling connected to her even though she was gone. I'm trying, Grandma. he whispered to the empty apartment. I'm trying to use what you gave me the right way. The glasses sat silent on the table, but somehow he felt like she heard him anyway. Spring came slowly that year, winter holding on with stubborn cold snaps that kept everyone in jackets longer than they wanted. But eventually the trees started budding, and the world turned that particular shade of green that meant renewal whether you were ready for it or not. Jamal turned 11 in February, a quiet celebration with Mrs. Patterson's homemade cake and video calls from Uncle Darius, who was traveling for work. It felt strange to mark the passage of time when so much had happened in such a short span. 4 months ago, his grandmother had been alive. 3 months ago, he'd walked into Granite Trust Bank. 2 months ago, the investigation had started. Now here he was, 11 years old, and somehow at the center of something much bigger than himself. The banking regulator's final report came out in early March, and it was damning. Jennifer Park got an advance copy and called Uncle Darius before it went public. They found systematic evidence of discriminatory practices across 14 Granite Trust branches, she said, her voice tight with professional excitement. The incentive structure Gavin exposed was just the beginning. They had internal training materials that explicitly profiled certain types of customers as higher risk based on factors that correlate heavily with race and ethnicity. Cash-based businesses, certain zip codes, occupations like domestic work or manual labor, all flagged for additional scrutiny. Can you send me the full report? Darius asked, putting the call on speaker so Jamal could hear. It's going public tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm running a follow-up piece. The state attorney general is considering whether to pursue civil rights charges. This is big, Darius, bigger than anyone expected. After she hung up, Jamal looked at his uncle, who was visiting for a long weekend. What does civil rights charges mean? It means the government might take legal action against the bank for violating people's rights to equal treatment. It's serious. Banks can survive fines, but criminal charges? That's a different level of consequence. The report went public the next morning, and the response was immediate. Protests organized outside Granite Trust headquarters in the state capital. Civil rights organizations issued statements calling for leadership changes. 3 board members resigned. The CEO gave a press conference where he apologized repeatedly, announced the creation of a diversity and inclusion office, and promised comprehensive reforms. But it was a smaller announcement buried in the back of the business section that caught Jamal's attention. Gavin Rourke had been officially terminated for cause, making him ineligible for severance and effectively blacklisting him from management positions at reputable financial institutions. He won't work in banking again, Uncle Darius explained. Not at any decent institution. Background checks will show the termination, and word spreads in the industry. He'll probably end up in a completely different field. Is that fair? Jamal asked. His uncle raised an eyebrow. You're asking if the man who humiliated you deserves sympathy? I'm asking if losing his whole career is the right punishment for what he did. Darius was quiet for a long moment. That's a more complex question than you might think. Gavin made choices that hurt you and probably hurt other customers we don't even know about, but he was also operating in a system that rewarded those choices. Is he more responsible than the executives who designed that system? I don't know. Justice is messy, Jamal. Sometimes the people who get punished are just the visible faces of much bigger problems. The conversation stuck with Jamal over the following weeks. He found himself thinking about Gavin sometimes, wondering what he was doing now, whether he'd found other work, whether he'd learned anything from what happened. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. Jamal wasn't sure he'd ever fully forgive the laughter in that marble lobby. But it was something more complicated than simple hatred. Hannah Pike sent a letter in April, addressed to Jamal at the apartment. Mrs. Patterson checked it first, making sure it wasn't anything harmful, then handed it over. Jamal, I wanted to update you on something. I've been working at Riverside Elementary for 5 months now, and I'm learning what real service looks like. Your grandmother's former colleagues have been teaching me about seeing students, really seeing them, not just processing them. Last week, a student came to the office during my shift. Her name is Maria, and she was crying because she'd lost her lunch money. The old me would have given her a sad smile and moved on. Instead, I sat with her, asked her about her day, and paid for her lunch myself. It was such a small thing, but she hugged me afterward, and I realized that's what your grandmother did every day. Small acts of dignity that add up to a life well lived. I'm trying to learn that lesson, even if I'm learning it late. The scholarship fund awarded its first grants last week. 3 students received full tuition support to pursue education degrees. Their photos are on the school's website if you want to see them. One of them wrote in her essay that she wants to teach because a teacher once made her feel like she mattered when nobody else did. That's your grandmother's legacy continuing. Thank you for being braver than I was. Hannah. Jamal showed the letter to Uncle Darius during their weekly video call. She's trying, his uncle said. That counts for something. Reggie's trying too. I saw a news piece about Roosevelt Middle School's new security program. He was interviewed about building trust with students. And what about you? Darius asked. How are you doing with all of this? It was the question Jamal had been avoiding, even to himself. I don't know. Sometimes I'm fine. Sometimes I'm really angry. Sometimes I just want to forget it all happened. All of those feelings are valid. You went through something traumatic. You're allowed to process it however you need to. Marcus says I should write about it for English class. We have to do a personal narrative assignment. What do you think about that? Jamal pulled at a loose thread on his sleeve. I think I'm tired of my story being public. I want it to just be mine again. Then make it yours. Write it or don't write it. Talk about it or don't talk about it. You get to decide how much of yourself you share with the world, Jamal. Don't let anyone, including me, pressure you into processing this on anyone's timeline but your own. The personal narrative assignment came due in May. Jamal wrote about learning to cook with his grandmother instead, about the Sunday afternoons they'd spent making her famous macaroni and cheese, about how she'd taught him to measure ingredients by feel rather than exact measurements, about the way cooking was really a lesson in trusting yourself. Miss Washington gave him an A and wrote at the top, "Beautiful work. Your grandmother would be proud." She would have been, Jamal thought, not because the essay was about her, but because it was honest and true, and showed he was learning to trust his own voice. The Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship awarded its second round of grants in June, just as school was letting out for summer. 5 students this time, the fund having grown enough to expand. The school district organized a small ceremony, and they invited Jamal to attend. He almost said no. The idea of standing in front of people, being the face of his grandmother's legacy, felt overwhelming. But Uncle Darius flew in for it, and Mrs. Patterson bought a new dress, and somehow Jamal found himself in the Riverside Elementary Auditorium on a warm June evening, surrounded by people who'd loved Eleanor Carter. The scholarship recipients gave speeches. A young woman named Sophia talked about growing up in a neighborhood where teachers came and went, but one teacher, Mrs. Carter, had stayed, had believed in her, had written recommendation letters that helped her get into college. Another recipient, a man named David, who was going back to school after years in construction, spoke about how his own elementary school teacher had been the first person to suggest he was smart enough for college, and he wanted to pay that forward. When it was Jamal's turn to speak, he stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. Former students, current teachers, community members, reporters with cameras. He'd prepared remarks, but they suddenly seemed wrong. My grandmother taught me that respect isn't something you earn, he said instead, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. It's something every person deserves just for being human. I learned that lesson the hard way a few months ago when people saw me and made assumptions about who I was and what I deserved. But my grandmother had prepared me for that moment by showing me every single day what it looks like to treat people with dignity, no matter who they are or where they come from. He paused, looking down at his notes, and then deciding to abandon them entirely. These scholarships aren't really about money. They're about my grandmother's belief that every kid deserves a teacher who sees them, who believes in them, who treats them like they matter. If you're receiving one of these scholarships, you're making a promise to be that teacher for someone else. That's her real legacy. That's what matters. The applause was warm and long. Afterward, people approached him with stories about his grandmother, moments he'd never heard before. The student she'd tutored every Tuesday after school for 2 years. The parent she'd called personally when their child was struggling. The colleague she'd mentored through a difficult first year of teaching. Each story added another layer to his understanding of who Eleanor Carter had been beyond his grandmother. She'd been a force in hundreds of lives, a constant presence of dignity and belief and stubborn refusal to give up on anyone. She used to say something to me, an elderly man told Jamal, his voice thick with emotion. I was in her class in 1976 and I was a mess. Bad home situation, failing grades, attitude problems. Every other teacher had written me off. But Mrs. Carter looked me in the eye one day and said, I see you, not who you're pretending to be, not who everyone says you are. I see who you actually are, and that person is worth investing in. I'm a social worker now. I've said those same words to countless kids over my career. That's her legacy, too. The ceremony ended with refreshments in the cafeteria, and Jamal found himself standing near the wall where class photos hung in neat rows. He found his grandmother's class from 1988, the year she'd started the account. 25 small faces, some smiling, some serious, all looking at the camera with that particular mix of boredom and hope that defined elementary school photographs. His grandmother stood at the end of the row, young and vibrant, her smile genuine. Behind that smile was a woman who'd just started saving for a grandson she wouldn't meet for another 7 years, who was already planning, already sacrificing, already building a foundation of possibility. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Uncle Darius appeared beside him, holding a cup of punch. All these lives she touched. I wish I'd understood this when she was alive. How many people she mattered to. You understood what mattered, that she loved you, that she saw you. The rest is just context. His uncle draped an arm around Jamal's shoulders. Come on, I want to introduce you to someone. The someone was a woman in her 60s, professional and polished, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Jamal, this is Dr. Patricia Chen. She's the superintendent of schools now, but she was in your grandmother's first class. 37 years ago, Dr. Chen said, shaking Jamal's hand. I was 7 years old, struggling to read, convinced I was stupid. Your grandmother spent her lunch periods with me for an entire year, using different techniques until she found one that worked. By second grade, I was reading at a fifth grade level. By high school, I was getting straight A's. Now I oversee education policy for the entire district. She pulled out a folder. I wanted to show you something we're implementing next year, partially because of your grandmother's example, partially because of what happened to you at that bank. We're creating a new curriculum around dignity and respect, teaching students that everyone deserves to be treated as fully human regardless of their circumstances. We're calling it the Eleanor Carter Dignity Initiative. Jamal looked through the materials, lesson plans, activity guides, assessment rubrics, all designed to teach elementary school students the same lessons his grandmother had spent 37 years modeling. We're starting with Riverside, Dr. Chen continued, but the goal is to expand district-wide within 3 years. We want every student to graduate knowing that their worth isn't determined by others' perceptions. That respect is a right, not a privilege. She would have loved this, Jamal said quietly. She would have insisted we do better, Dr. Chen corrected with a smile. Your grandmother was never satisfied with good enough. She always pushed for better, for more, for deeper impact. This curriculum is our attempt to meet the standard she set. The evening wound down slowly. People filtered out, carrying paper plates and memories. Uncle Darius talked with former students. Mrs. Patterson traded recipes with someone from the PTA. And Jamal sat in an elementary school cafeteria, surrounded by the echoes of his grandmother's life's work, and felt something he hadn't felt since before she died. Peace. Not the absence of pain or anger or loss, but a sense that her life had meant something, that her choices had mattered, that the world was genuinely better because she'd been in it. The summer stretched out long and lazy after that. Jamal spent time with Marcus, played basketball at the community center, read books from the library, and slowly learned to live with the weight of everything that had happened. Uncle Darius visited twice more, each time bringing new updates about the scholarship fund, or the bank investigation, or the ongoing reforms at Granite Trust. In August, Jennifer Park published a comprehensive follow-up piece tracking the outcomes of the initial investigation. Granite Trust had implemented new training, revised their incentive structures, and established an independent oversight committee. The state banking regulator was using their case as a model for investigating other institutions. 3 other banks had preemptively revised their policies to avoid similar scrutiny. But the most significant development came near the end of the article. A class action lawsuit had been filed on behalf of customers who'd been subjected to discriminatory treatment at Granite Trust. The lead plaintiff was a woman named Rosa Martinez, whose nail salon deposits had been repeatedly flagged as suspicious despite years of legitimate business records. Your story opened the door, Jennifer told Jamal during a phone interview for her article. Rosa and others felt empowered to come forward because they saw what happened to you. They saw that speaking up could lead to real consequences for institutions that mistreat people. I didn't do anything special, Jamal said, uncomfortable with the framing. I just wanted to access my account. That's exactly why it matters. You weren't trying to be a hero or make a statement. You were just a kid trying to do a normal thing, and the system failed you. That's more powerful than any activist campaign because it shows how everyday injustice really works. It's not dramatic. It's ordinary people being treated as less than human in ordinary situations. The article ran with a photo of Jamal standing in front of Riverside Elementary, the building where his grandmother had taught for nearly 4 decades. He looked older in the photo than he felt, more serious, like someone who'd learned lessons he shouldn't have had to learn yet. School started again in September. 6th grade now, middle school looming on the horizon. Jamal's homeroom teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, pulled him aside on the first day. I knew your grandmother, he said. She was my master teacher when I was student teaching 15 years ago. Best mentor I ever had. She taught me that every kid comes to school carrying invisible burdens, and our job is to make those burdens lighter, not heavier. She was good at that, Jamal agreed. So here's the thing. I know you went through something difficult last year. I know your name was in the papers and people have opinions about what happened. In this classroom, you're just Jamal. Not a news story, not a symbol, just a student. If you need accommodations or support, let me know. But I'm not going to treat you like you're fragile. Your grandmother wouldn't have wanted that. It was exactly the right thing to say. Jamal felt something unknot in his chest. Thank you. The year progressed normally after that. Classes and homework and friend drama and all the ordinary complications of being 11 years old. The bank incident receded into background noise, something that had happened but didn't define every moment anymore. In November, Jamal received a letter from Reggie Miles with a photo attached. It showed Reggie with a group of middle school students, all wearing matching t-shirts that said Roosevelt Safety Ambassadors. We started a peer mediation program, the letter explained. Students helping students resolve conflicts before they escalate. Teaching kids that authority isn't about power over others, it's about service to the community. Last week, 2 students who'd been feuding for months worked through their issues with help from the ambassadors. No suspension, no police involvement, just kids learning to communicate. Your grandmother would have approved, I think. Thank you for helping me find my way back to work that actually matters. In December, almost exactly a year after that cold afternoon at Granite Trust, Uncle Darius called with news about the class action lawsuit. They settled. Granite Trust is paying out $12 million to affected customers and implementing additional reforms beyond what the regulator required. Rosa Martinez and the other plaintiffs are getting compensation, and the bank is establishing a community investment fund for neighborhoods that were disproportionately targeted by their policies. 12 million, Jamal repeated, trying to comprehend the number. It's not just about the money. It's about acknowledgement. The bank had to admit in the settlement that their practices caused harm. That matters almost as much as the financial compensation. That evening, Jamal pulled out his grandmother's letter and read it for what must have been the 100th time. The words were so familiar now, he could almost recite them from memory, but they still carried weight. Your worth isn't measured in dollars, but in character and kindness. She'd been right, but she'd also given him the dollars anyway. Because while worth shouldn't be measured in money, money could buy the security to stand firm when the world tried to diminish you. It could fund scholarships and support lawyers and create space for people to fight back against unjust systems. The account sat mostly untouched, still invested, still growing. Occasionally, Uncle Darius would send updates about its performance, about compound interest doing its quiet work. Jamal had taken out small amounts for school supplies and to donate to causes his grandmother would have supported. But mostly, he left it alone, trusting that when he really needed it, for college, for emergencies, for opportunities he couldn't yet imagine, it would be there, just like his grandmother had planned. In February, Jamal turned 12. The apartment felt less empty now. though he still kept his grandmother's reading glasses on the kitchen table. Mrs. Patterson had suggested putting them away, but Jamal couldn't quite bring himself to do it. They were a reminder, a touchstone, a physical link to lessons that continued to unfold. The scholarship fund awarded its third round of grants that spring. 8 students now, the fund having grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. The ceremony was bigger this year, held in the high school auditorium instead of the elementary school cafeteria. Local news covered it. A state representative gave a speech about the importance of investing in education. But for Jamal, the most meaningful part was meeting the scholarship recipients themselves. Students from different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, different circumstances, all united by a desire to teach and a belief that education could change lives. One of them, a young man named Isaiah, approached Jamal after the ceremony. "I went to Riverside Elementary. Your grandmother was my 3rd grade teacher. I was dealing with some heavy stuff at home, and she noticed. She never pried, never made it a big thing, but she made sure I had breakfast every morning and a safe place to hang out after school. I don't know if I'd have made it through that year without her." "What are you going to teach?" Jamal asked. "Elementary school, 3rd grade if I can. I want to be for some other kid what your grandmother was for me." Isaiah smiled. "That's how legacies work, right? We pass forward what we were given." The summer of Jamal's 12th year brought another development. Hannah Pike published a personal essay in an education journal about unlearning bias and learning to truly see students. She wrote about her time at Granite Trust, about the assumptions she'd made, about the hard work of confronting her own prejudices and changing her behavior. "I cannot undo the harm I caused," she wrote in the conclusion, "but I can commit to doing better going forward, to questioning my assumptions, to seeing children as complete human beings deserving of dignity and respect, to understanding that service isn't about processing people efficiently. It's about honoring their humanity in every interaction." The essay circulated widely in education circles. Some people praised her honesty. Others criticized her for making her own redemption arc the focus instead of the harm she'd caused. Jamal read it and felt the familiar, complicated mix of emotions: anger at what she'd done, acknowledgement that she was trying to change, frustration that he'd had to be the catalyst for her growth. He showed it to Uncle Darius during a visit. "What do you think?" his uncle asked. "I think she's trying. I think that's good. I also think I'm tired of being the lesson other people learn from." "That's fair. You get to be tired. You get to be angry. You get to be done with this whole chapter." Darius set the article aside. "You also get to decide when and if you ever engage with any of these people again. Forgiveness isn't mandatory, Jamal. Neither is holding grudges. You can just exist in the complicated middle space where you acknowledge someone's trying to be better without having to validate or absolve them." It was permission Jamal hadn't known he needed. Permission to feel multiple things at once, to not have his responses neatly categorized as either forgiveness or condemnation. In the fall of his 7th grade year, Jamal started volunteering at Riverside Elementary's after-school program. Not because he felt obligated to continue his grandmother's work, but because he genuinely enjoyed helping younger kids with homework and seeing them understand concepts that had confused them. One afternoon, a 2nd grader named Tyler was struggling with a math problem, getting increasingly frustrated and insisting he was too stupid to figure it out. Jamal sat down next to him. "You're not stupid. This problem is hard, and you haven't learned the trick to solve it yet. Those are different things." "I'm never going to learn it. My grandmother taught at this school for 37 years. You know what she told me once? She said every single student she ever taught struggled with something, every single one. The difference between students wasn't whether they struggled, it was whether they kept trying after they struggled." Tyler looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Really? Even the smart kids?" "Especially the smart kids, because the smart kids were used to things being easy, so when something was hard, they didn't have practice pushing through difficulty." Jamal pointed to the math problem. "You've got practice. You've pushed through hard things before. Let's break this down into smaller pieces and try again." 20 minutes later, Tyler solved the problem. His triumphant shout brought the other tutors over to see, and Jamal felt something warm settle in his chest. This was what his grandmother had done, day after day, year after year. Not grand gestures or dramatic interventions, just patient attention and stubborn belief that every kid could learn. The account statement arrived in December, almost 2 years to the day since that afternoon at Granite Trust. The balance had grown to $523,847, compound interest and market returns doing their quiet work. Jamal stared at the number, trying to connect it to all the lunch periods his grandmother had worked, all the Saturday tutoring sessions, all the small sacrifices that had accumulated into this substantial foundation. He called Uncle Darius. The account's over $500,000 now. Your grandmother was a better investor than most professionals. She understood that patience and consistency beat trying to time the market. I want to do something with part of it. Something now, not just saving it all for college. What are you thinking? The after-school program at Riverside. They're trying to expand but don't have funding for more tutors or supplies. I want to donate enough to support the program for 3 years. Give them stability to really build something sustainable. His uncle was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of money, Jamal. Probably $50,000 at least to fund a program properly for that long. I know, but the account keeps growing, and I keep thinking about what Grandma would do with this money if she were still here. She wouldn't hoard it. She'd invest it in kids. Then let's make it happen. I'll help you set it up as a proper grant with accountability measures and assessment benchmarks. Make sure the money's used effectively. The announcement came in January. The Eleanor Carter After School Initiative, funded by a grant from her grandson, would expand Riverside Elementary's tutoring program and provide resources for arts education, STEM activities, and literacy support. The program would serve up to 50 students per day, with priority given to students from underserved communities. Jamal attended the announcement but declined to speak publicly. He was learning to set boundaries around his story, to participate in his grandmother's legacy without making it the defining feature of his entire existence. But he did agree to an interview with Jennifer Park, who was writing a follow-up piece about long-term impacts of the bank discrimination case. "How has this experience changed you?" she asked, sitting across from him in a coffee shop near his school. Jamal thought about it carefully. "It taught me that systems are designed by people, which means they can be redesigned by people. It taught me that speaking up matters even when it's hard. And it taught me that my grandmother's approach to life, treating everyone with dignity, investing in people's potential, being patient with growth, that's not naive or idealistic. It's actually revolutionary." Revolutionary how? Because if everyone treated each other that way, most of the systems that hurt people couldn't survive. Banks couldn't incentivize discrimination if employees insisted on treating all customers with respect. Schools couldn't ignore struggling students if teachers committed to seeing every kid's potential. Change doesn't always require massive interventions. Sometimes it just requires enough people refusing to participate in dehumanizing systems. Jennifer smiled. "Your grandmother would be proud of that analysis." "Maybe. She'd probably tell me I was overthinking it and should go do my homework." The article ran a week later, tracking various outcomes from the original bank incident. Granite Trust had undergone significant leadership changes and reformed their policies. The state banking regulator had used their case to investigate other institutions, finding similar problems at 3 additional banks. The class action settlement had provided compensation to hundreds of affected customers, and the Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship had now supported 17 students pursuing education degrees. But the article also acknowledged the limitations. Discrimination hadn't ended. Banking practices still disadvantaged certain communities. The structural problems that created the incident at Granite Trust remained embedded in larger systems. Progress wasn't the same as victory. Jamal Carter understands this, Jennifer wrote. At 13, he has a nuanced view of change that many adults lack. He knows that what happened to him wasn't an isolated incident, but a symptom of bigger problems. He also knows that addressing those problems requires sustained effort, institutional accountability, and the kind of patient persistence his grandmother modeled throughout her teaching career. Jamal read the article and felt simultaneously seen and exposed. Jennifer had captured something true about how he understood the world now, but having it in print for everyone to read made him feel vulnerable in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Marcus's response was simpler. "Dude, that article made you sound like a philosopher or something. Very weird." "Thanks? I mean it in a good way. You're still my friend who can't make a free throw to save his life, but apparently you're also some kind of wisdom person now. It's a strange combination." It was a strange combination. Jamal was both the kid who struggled in science class and the young person quoted in newspaper articles about systemic change. Both the middle schooler who played video games with friends and the face of a banking discrimination case. Both ordinary and extraordinary, depending on who was looking and what they chose to see. The spring of his 8th grade year brought college acceptance letters for the scholarship recipients. All 17 students who'd received Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarships over the past 3 years had been accepted to colleges with strong education programs. Several had received additional awards and honors. One was going to an Ivy League school. The scholarship committee organized a celebration, and this time Jamal agreed to speak. My grandmother used to say that teaching was the most important job in the world because teachers shape every other profession, he told the assembled crowd. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, artists, they all had teachers who believed in them first. You 17 are going to be those teachers for the next generation. That's her legacy continuing through you. He paused, looking at the scholarship recipients. Some of you knew her. Some of you never met her. But all of you are carrying forward her belief that every kid deserves to be seen, to be believed in, to be treated with dignity. That's what she gave me, and through this scholarship, that's what she's giving you. Use it well. The applause was warm, but Jamal barely heard it. He was thinking about his grandmother in this same auditorium, probably sitting in the back row like she always did at school events, smiling that quiet smile that said she was proud but would never make a big deal about it. She would have been proud, not because the scholarship fund was large or because 17 students were going to college. She would have been proud because those 17 students were going to spend their careers seeing children the way she'd always seen them, as complete human beings worthy of investment and belief. That summer, Uncle Darius helped Jamal set up his college fund properly, separating it from the general account and establishing investment strategies for long-term growth. The remaining money, still substantial at over $400,000, would continue growing until Jamal needed it for undergraduate and potentially graduate education. You could go anywhere, his uncle said, reviewing the numbers. Any college in the country. Your grandmother made sure of that. I'm thinking about staying in state, Jamal admitted. The state university has a good program, and it would be cheaper. I could save the extra money for other things. Like what? I don't know yet, but I keep thinking there are probably other kids like me out there. Kids with potential but no resources. Kids who get overlooked because of what they look like or where they come from. Maybe I could help them too eventually. Darius looked at his nephew with something that might have been wonder. You really are Eleanor's grandson. Same instinct to invest in others. Same long-term thinking. Same refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. Is that a good thing? It's the best thing. High school started that fall, and with it came new challenges and opportunities. Jamal joined the debate team where he discovered a talent for arguing policy positions and analyzing systemic problems. He volunteered regularly at the after-school program, now expanded and thriving. He maintained his friendship with Marcus while developing new relationships with classmates who saw him as just another freshman, not the kid from the news. The bank incident became part of his past rather than his entire present. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but integrated into a larger story that was still being written. In the fall of his sophomore year, Jamal received a letter from someone he'd never expected to hear from again. Gavin Rourke. The envelope arrived with a return address in another state, and inside was a handwritten letter on plain paper. Jamal, I know I have no right to contact you after the cease and desist, and I'm not asking for a response. I simply wanted you to know what's happened in the 3 years since that day at the bank. I was fired, as you know. I couldn't find work in banking or financial services. For a while I was bitter about it, convinced I'd been made a scapegoat for systemic problems I didn't create. I wasn't entirely wrong about that, but I wasn't right either. I made choices. I could have handled your situation with professionalism and dignity even within a broken system. I chose cruelty instead. That was on me, not on bank policy. After 2 years of struggling, I went back to school for a teaching credential. I'm currently student teaching at a high school in a district that serves predominantly low-income students of color. The irony isn't lost on me. Every day, I work with students who remind me of you, smart, capable, deserving of respect, and so often denied it by people who should know better. I'll never be the teacher your grandmother was, but I'm trying to be someone who at least doesn't make things worse for kids who already face too many obstacles. I'm trying to see students as human beings first, not potential problems to be managed. It's harder than it should be, which tells me how deeply my prejudices run. I'm working on it. You changed my life, though not in the way I would have chosen. You forced me to confront who I really was, underneath the professional polish and corporate success. That confrontation was painful and necessary. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that the harm I caused you ultimately led to growth I desperately needed. I hope that provides some small comfort. I hope you're thriving. I hope your grandmother's legacy continues to expand and touch lives. And I hope you know that you taught me more about dignity in 43 minutes than I learned in 20 years of banking. Gavin Rourke. Jamal read the letter 3 times, his emotions cycling through anger, confusion, and something that might have been cautious hope. He showed it to Uncle Darius during their weekly call. "What do you think?" his uncle asked. "I think he's trying. I think he might actually be learning. I also think it's not my job to validate his growth or make him feel better about his choices." That's exactly right. His growth is his responsibility. You get to decide whether to acknowledge it or ignore it entirely. Can I do both? Acknowledge that he's trying while also being clear that his apology doesn't erase what happened? You can do whatever feels right to you, Jamal. This is your story. You get to write the next chapter however you want. Jamal thought about it for several days before finally writing a brief response. "Mr. Rourke, I received your letter. I'm glad you're working on being better. The students you teach deserve someone who sees them fully. I hope you continue that work. I don't forgive you for what happened, but I acknowledge that you're trying to change. That's all I can offer. Jamal Carter." He mailed it, and then deliberately didn't think about it anymore. Gavin's redemption was Gavin's concern. Jamal had his own life to live. The scholarship fund awarded its 6th round of grants in the spring of Jamal's junior year. 32 students had now received support to pursue education degrees. Some of them had graduated from college and were starting their first teaching jobs. Others were still in school, working toward their degrees and dreaming about their own classrooms. At the ceremony, one of the first scholarship recipients, Sophia, who'd spoken about Mrs. Carter staying when other teachers left, returned to give a speech. She was now teaching 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary, working in the same building where Eleanor Carter had spent 37 years. "I have Mrs. Carter's old classroom," Sophia told the audience. "Same room number, same view of the playground, same too small closet for supplies. Sometimes I stand at the front and imagine her standing in the same spot, teaching the same subjects, seeing the same kind of potential in students that she saw in me. I try to ask myself, what would Mrs. Carter do? How would she handle this struggling reader, this anxious test taker, this child who comes to school hungry? And then I try to do that. I won't ever be as good as she was, but I can honor what she gave me by trying." After the ceremony, Jamal approached Sophia. "Can I visit your classroom sometime? See the room where my grandmother taught?" "Of course. Anytime." He went on a Tuesday afternoon in May, the spring light streaming through windows that his grandmother had looked through thousands of times. The room was full of student work, colorful posters about kindness and growth mindset, a reading corner with pillows and books. Sophia's touches, but the bones of the room were the same. Jamal stood at the front and tried to imagine his grandmother here, younger than he'd ever known her, building the career that would touch so many lives, starting the account that would eventually become his foundation, making choices every single day to invest in children's potential, even when the world told her they weren't worth the effort. "She had a rocking chair in that corner," Sophia said, pointing, "for read-alouds. She said stories were the best way to teach empathy because you got to live in someone else's perspective for a while." "She used to read to me too," Jamal said quietly, "every night before bed, until I got too old and insisted I could read to myself." "What was her favorite book?" "The one about the Velveteen Rabbit, about becoming real through being loved." Sophia smiled. "She read that to us too. I remember the line about how once you're real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand." They stood in the classroom together, 2 people connected by Eleanor Carter's legacy, separated by years but united by the lessons she'd taught about seeing people fully and treating them with dignity. "Thank you for the scholarship," Sophia said. "I know it's technically from your grandmother, but you made it happen by establishing the fund and continuing to support it. You're carrying forward her work." "We both are," Jamal replied. That's how legacies work. He graduated from high school 3 years later, at the top of his class, with admission to multiple universities and a full scholarship to the State University's honors program. At graduation, the principal mentioned the Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship in her remarks, noting that it had now supported 53 students over 9 years and had become a model for other community-based education funds. Jamal walked across the stage to receive his diploma, and in the audience he could see Uncle Darius standing and cheering, Mrs. Patterson dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, his friends from debate team shouting his name. His life, full and rich and entirely his own, built on the foundation his grandmother had created, but extending far beyond it. That night, alone in the apartment, he pulled out her letter one final time. The paper was soft from handling, the creases permanent from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times. He read the familiar words and understood them differently now than he had at 10 years old. Your worth isn't measured in dollars, but in character and kindness. She'd given him dollars to prove they didn't measure worth. She'd given him a foundation to stand on so he could withstand the world's attempts to diminish him. And she'd given him an example to follow, not perfectly, because perfection was impossible, but persistently, with the kind of patient dedication that changed lives one interaction at a time. Jamal carefully folded the letter and placed it in a frame, alongside a photograph of his grandmother in her classroom. He hung it on the wall where he could see it every morning, a reminder of where he came from and what he carried forward. Then he picked up the worn sneakers he'd kept all these years, the ones that had marked him as poor and unworthy in Gavin Rourke's eyes. He set them on the shelf next to his new college textbooks and his acceptance letters, a reminder that respect was never about what you wore or what you owned. It was about insisting on your humanity even when the world wanted to deny it. The Eleanor Carter Memorial Scholarship would continue long after Jamal graduated college. After he started his own career, after he had his own family and told them stories about their great-grandmother who'd taught him that dignity wasn't negotiable. The after-school program at Riverside Elementary would serve generations of students. The banking reforms would protect countless customers from discrimination. And somewhere, in ways Jamal would never fully see or know, the ripples from that cold December afternoon would continue spreading outward, touching lives and changing systems, and proving that one person's stubborn commitment to treating people with dignity could reshape the world. Not all at once, not perfectly, but persistently, patiently, with the kind of long-term investment that Eleanor Carter had understood better than anyone. Jamal turned off the light and went to bed, ready for whatever came next, carrying his grandmother's lessons like armor and her love like a compass, pointing him toward a future built on the foundation she'd laid stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice, year by year. A future where dignity was the baseline, not the exception, where children walked into banks and schools and every other institution expecting to be seen as fully human, where respect was understood not as something earned, but as something owed to every person simply because they existed. It would take work to build that future, generations of work probably. But Eleanor Carter had taught him that meaningful change was always a long game, and the people who changed the world were the ones patient enough to keep playing. Jamal Carter was ready to play.